If you've ever stood in a room full of people who are supposed to love you, only to feel completely invisible, then you'll understand what I'm about to say. My name's Liam, I'm 32, and I own a mid-sized but rapidly growing logistics tech company I built from the ground up. You wouldn't know that, though, if you met my parents, because to them, I'm practically background noise. I'm the quiet one, the dependable one, that doesn't need much attention one. And trust me, in my family, that means you don't get any at all. Growing up, it was always about my older brother, Jake. He's 2 years ahead of me, louder, flashier, and frankly, way better at playing the favorite son role. He was the golden child, the kind who got applause for showing up. He once brought home a B- on a science test and got pizza night. I brought home a full-ride scholarship letter and was told to just leave it on the table. I used to think maybe I just wasn't loud enough, or maybe I didn't shine in the right way. But as I got older, I realized the truth was simpler and more painful. They'd already decided who mattered. I tried not to let it get to me. I focused on building my life, keeping my head down, and working harder than anyone else I knew. I didn't have time for bitterness. I was busy coding in my tiny apartment, taking consulting gigs, and slowly turning my freelance hustle into a company that now employs close to 60 people. No investors, no loans, just grit. I don't flash it around. I don't drive anything flashy, and I definitely don't show up to family dinners talking about IPOs and profit margins. But the silence from my parents? That still stung more than I'd like to admit. The real story started 6 months ago, at a family gathering for my dad's birthday. I'd flown in from across the state because I knew it meant something to him, even if I suspected he'd barely register I was there. We were at this Italian place they love, nothing fancy, just a noisy little spot my mom insists has the best lasagna this side of the freeway. Everyone was gathered around the long table, passing garlic bread and telling half-funny stories about Jake's high school football days like they were ancient legends. I was sitting at the far end, sipping water and listening, smiling when appropriate, offering the occasional, "That's wild," when prompted. Then my mom tapped her glass with a spoon. "Everyone, I just want to take a second to say how proud we are of Jake," she said, her eyes glistening. "He's really doing so well for himself. Vice president of regional sales at that big firm. Just look at our only successful child." There was laughter, a few claps, a dramatic here from Aunt Marcy. And me? I was sitting right there, fork halfway to my mouth. I didn't say a word. I glanced around to see if anyone had caught that. My cousin Matt gave me this quick look of sympathy before looking down at his plate like he didn't want to be involved. My uncle kept chewing. Jake just smiled like he'd been knighted by the queen. And my parents? My mom had already moved on to some story about Jake's last trip to Vegas. I felt like the floor had quietly dropped out from under me. Now, this isn't the first time they've brushed me aside. There's been plenty. Like the time I paid off their second mortgage when Dad lost his job. Money they still don't know came from me because I wired it through an anonymous friend who owed me a favor. Or the time I set up a full college fund for my niece after Jake forgot to enroll in the 529 plan. Still, I sat there that night, listening to them go on, feeling this numbness creep into my chest like cold water. I realized, in that moment, I could show up in a tuxedo made of gold and they'd still ask where Jake was. So I smiled. I didn't make a scene. I didn't say, "Actually, I just closed a contract with one of the top 3 shipping carriers in the country." I didn't mention that I employ more people than Jake's company does. I didn't say anything. I just stood up, walked over to my mom, kissed her on the cheek, and said, "Happy birthday, Dad. I'll see you around." Then I left. Quiet. Clean. No one followed me out. For a while, I tried to shake it off. Went back home, poured myself into work. The company was scaling up fast, so I had no time to dwell. But that moment, that sentence, "our only successful child," started to echo. Not just because it was cruel, but because it was so easy for them to say. So thoughtless. Like I'd never mattered in the first place. Then came the twist. About 3 months later, I got a call from Jake. It was late, around 10:45 p.m., and I was still at the office, finalizing some integration notes for a new partner platform. I almost didn't pick up, but something about his name flashing on my screen made me pause. "Hey," I said. There was a long silence. Then Jake's voice, quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Hey, Liam, you got a second?" I leaned back in my chair. "Yeah, what's up?" And then he told me everything. The company he worked for had gone through a brutal restructuring. His entire department had been downsized. He was offered a severance, but the market was tough. He'd been out of work for weeks. Interviews weren't landing. His mortgage was stacking up. His wife was panicking. And then he said something that truly shocked me. I was wondering if you were hiring. There it was. The golden child, calling me, the invisible brother, for help. I didn't say yes immediately. I told him I'd think about it, that I need to talk to HR. And technically I did. But the truth is, something had already shifted in my mind. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. But I was done being the background character in someone else's story. So I started planning. Not revenge in the classic movie sense. No explosions, no yelling matches, no family-wide drama. I didn't want to humiliate him. I just wanted to remind everyone who I was and what I'd built. What happened next? Well, let's just say it was subtle, quiet, and incredibly satisfying. When I hung up that night after Jake's call, I sat in the dark for a long time. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel smug or satisfied. If anything, I felt hollow. This was my brother. The same one who once held my head underwater in the pool a second too long because he thought it was funny. The one who told everyone at school I had a crush on my math teacher when we were teens. The same guy who, year after year, watched our parents diminish me and never once said, "Hey, maybe give Liam a little credit." Now he needed me. Not for advice. Not to catch up. For a job. I could have said no. Honestly, I probably should have. But something in me clicked. I didn't want to reject him. I wanted to do something better, something sharper. Something that would make them all see me without me ever having to raise my voice. 2 days later, I called him back. "I've got a spot," I said, flipping through some internal listings we had for warehouse support and operations floater roles. Entry level. Not glamorous. But it's a paycheck. You in? There was a beat of hesitation on the other end. What kind of position?" "Janitorial assistant," I said evenly. "Helping the facilities team. Cleaning, maintenance, some stockroom organizing. It's steady work." Silence again. "Look, Jake," I added calmly. "You're overqualified. I get it. But I can't just create a VP role out of thin air. If you need something, this is what I've got right now. I'm not going to BS you." There was a long pause before he said, "Yeah, okay. Thanks, man. I'll take it." I kept my tone friendly. I even told him HR would walk him through everything. But inside, something cold and still had taken root. I didn't put Jake in that job to humiliate him. I put him there because for once in my life, I wanted to control the narrative. No handouts. No shortcuts. Just the reality of who we really were when nobody else was watching. He started the following Monday. I didn't tell anyone at the company that he was my brother. I didn't need to. HR placed him on a rotating schedule between our two buildings, mostly doing basic cleaning tasks and stocking break rooms. It wasn't demeaning. We pay fairly. He had benefits, but it was quiet work. Unseen. He'd never experienced that before. I saw him a few times in the halls. He'd nod or wave. I'd nod back. We didn't really talk. A few weeks in, one of my junior managers came to me and said, "Hey, that new facilities guy, Jake. He said he used to be a VP of something. Why is he mopping floors now?" I just smiled. Tough market right now. Around that time, I started getting texts from my mom. "Hey, sweetie, how's work? Are you coming to the fall family picnic next month? Your brother mentioned he's working for a tech company now. Small world, huh?" I didn't reply to most of them. I knew what this was. They smelled change in the air. For the first time, Jake was struggling and I wasn't. The family picnic was something they did every October. Always the same park. Always the same potluck sign-up sheet. I'd skipped the last two. But this time, curiosity got the better of me. I drove out, wearing a simple dark polo and jeans. Nothing flashy. When I arrived, people were milling around, laughing, tossing footballs, loading up paper plates with potato salad. My parents were by the grill. My mom lit up when she saw me. "Liam, you came. Oh, sweetie, look at you. You've lost weight." Not even a "how are you." My dad clapped me on the shoulder. "Jake's around here somewhere," he said, like that was what I was waiting to hear. I nodded and went to grab a drink. A few cousins chatted me up, small talk, work stuff. Someone mentioned they heard I was doing something with software. I gave vague answers. I'd long ago learned not to bother explaining. Then Jake showed up, holding a plate of ribs. He looked tired, a little sunburned, and there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, an edge of humility. He didn't say much to me, just gave a short "hey" and moved on. I stayed for about an hour, then slipped out without saying goodbye. I'd seen what I needed to see. My brother, once the family's pride and joy, was quieter now, smaller, and they still hadn't asked a single thing about what I was doing. Then came Thanksgiving. My mom called a week before. "We really want you here this year," she said, her voice chipper. "We're doing a big dinner at the house. Jake's bringing a turkey from that fancy place downtown. Everyone's pitching in." I wasn't planning to go, but then she added, "Your father says it's been a tough year for Jake. We want to lift him up, you know? He's still our shining star." That line, "still our shining star," it echoed in my chest like a gunshot. I said I'd be there. I showed up on time, with a bottle of wine and a polite smile. The house was warm and full of noise. My nieces ran around in socks. My aunts chatted in the kitchen. Jake was carving the turkey like a game show host. Dinner was loud and cheerful. I didn't say much, just listened. Then, halfway through dessert, my dad stood up with his glass. "I just want to say," he began, "how proud we are of this family. Especially Jake. He's had a rough patch, sure, but he's working hard again. Back in the game. That's what matters." Mom nodded. "He never gives up." My uncle chimed in. "Resilient, that's what he is." And then my dad, bless him, said it again. "Our only successful child." There it was. Again. I sat there, holding my fork, frozen. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shocked. I was just done. Jake shifted awkwardly in his seat, eyes flicking toward me for the briefest second before looking away. I didn't speak. Not then. I finished my pie, helped clear a few plates. Then I hugged my mom goodbye and drove home in silence. A week later, Jake asked if he could meet for lunch. We sat at a quiet diner near my office. He looked tired again. Older. A little embarrassed. "Hey," he started. "So, I just wanted to say thanks. For the job. I know it's not glamorous, but it's helping. I'm grateful." I nodded. He glanced out the window. "I'm not used to this. You know? Being the guy people forget. It's weird." I didn't say anything. Then he added, "They don't ask me how I'm really doing. They just assume I'm fine." I looked him in the eye. "Yeah, I know the feeling." He flinched a little, then smiled sadly. "Guess you've known it longer than me." There was a pause between us. Years of silence, bruises, swallowed pride, all sitting at that table. I paid the bill. He went back to the office. I watched him cross the street, his shoulders hunched against the cold. And that night, I started planning the Christmas dinner. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted closure. But before that could happen, something else cracked the surface. Something that changed the entire trajectory. It was the following Monday when I got a call from our building supervisor. "Hey Liam," he said. You might want to see this." He sent over a security video. There was Jake, in the executive hallway, scrubbing the floor outside the bathrooms. A few junior employees walked by, laughing. One of them, someone we'd just hired, nudged his friend and said, "Bet the VP gig didn't teach him this, huh?" Jake stood up fast. Too fast. He slipped, knocking over the mop bucket. Water everywhere. And the look on his face? Rage. Humiliation. And worst of all, fear. I paused the video. Replayed it. Sat with it. He hadn't told me anything. Hadn't complained. Hadn't asked for reassignment. But that video, that was the moment I realized he wasn't just learning humility. He was unraveling. I didn't know it then, but what happened next, what he did next, would be the real breaking point. The betrayal that made everything clear. And it was coming faster than I ever expected. The betrayal came on a Wednesday morning, wrapped in the kind of sterile corporate drama I thought I was immune to by now. I walked into the office early, as usual, coffee in hand, mind already racing with notes for the upcoming investor call. I passed by the front desk, nodded at Jenna, our receptionist, and made my way toward the elevators when I noticed something strange. A tight huddle of people, 3 or 4 mid-level employees, whispering with furrowed brows and hushed tones. When they saw me, they scattered. I stepped into the elevator, hit the top floor button, and exhaled. I knew something was off. 10 minutes later, Ryan, my second in command, knocked on my office door. "Got a minute?" I nodded. He walked in and closed the door behind him. That's when I knew it was serious. "You might want to see this," he said, holding out his phone. I took it. It was a screenshot from Slack, one of our internal channels. Someone had leaked sensitive internal documents. Pricing tiers, client acquisition strategy, even part of our upcoming automation roadmap, all anonymously posted on a startup gossip forum. It wasn't a major breach, but it was enough to raise eyebrows with some of our clients. Then came the kicker, the person who downloaded the files. Jake. He'd used his janitor access card to swipe into the executive hallway late at night, then plugged into one of the workstations. The IT log showed everything. I sat there, staring at the screen, while Ryan explained the rest. I had security pull footage. It's definitely him. I haven't said anything yet. Figured you'd want to handle it directly. My ears rang. My chest felt hollow. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Jake, my brother, had stolen from me. And not just data. Trust. After everything I'd done to pull him up off the floor without fanfare or humiliation, he turned around and stabbed me in the back like it was nothing. I thanked Ryan, asked him to keep it quiet for now, and sat in my office until well past noon. At some point, I opened my drawer and pulled out an old photo of us. Jake and me, maybe 8 and 10 years old, standing in front of a broken sprinkler with soaked clothes and matching grins. Back when things were simple. Before the hierarchy. Before the family dinners that felt like board meetings. Before favoritism became policy. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in the office, lights dimmed, replaying everything over and over. His smug face at Thanksgiving. That first phone call when he said, "I was wondering if you were hiring." The way he avoided my eyes at the picnic. And now this. I was humiliated. Not because the leak had hurt the company. It hadn't. Not deeply. We'd caught it early, locked everything down, and informed legal. But because I had let him in. I had bent over backwards to offer him dignity when he'd never offered me an ounce of it in our entire lives. I was done. That weekend, I packed a small duffel, drove 3 hours north, and checked into a quiet cabin with no internet. I left my phone in the glove box and took long walks by the lake. I didn't talk to anyone. I needed to figure out what came next, not just with Jake, but with everything. It was there, watching the sunrise spill gold over still water, that I realized something. I'd been playing their game. My entire life, I'd let my parents' words weigh more than they should. I'd worked like a ghost in the shadows, hoping that maybe one day they'd notice. That one day, I'd finally earn their love. But the truth? I had already outgrown the need for it. I didn't want their praise anymore. I wanted peace. The next week, I returned to the office and made changes. Quiet ones. I promoted Ryan to COO, giving him more decision-making power so I could step back a little. I started working 4 days a week instead of 6. I booked a 2-week trip to Portugal with no itinerary, just a passport and a journal. And I moved Jake. Not fired. Not humiliated. I transferred him to a quiet satellite office we owned 2 towns over, part of a maintenance team with no access to the central systems, no chance to hurt the company again. He was technically still employed, but the message was clear. We were done. He called once, the day he got the transfer notice. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was strained. "I messed up," he said. "I didn't mean to. I was just desperate. I thought maybe if I could prove something to someone. I don't know. I'm sorry, Liam." I didn't call back. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to fix things. I was rebuilding myself. I spent more time with people who actually saw me. Old college friends, colleagues. The guy who ran the used bookstore I used to go to in my 20s. I reconnected with a girl I dated briefly years ago. Her name was Erica. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense laugh. And she didn't care that I ran a company. She liked that I listened. We started going on walks, cooking together. Nothing serious. Just quiet. Grounding. At the same time, my company was thriving. Ryan was killing it. We landed 2 new contracts. Our internal culture was tighter than ever, and our net promoter score was through the roof. And still, my parents said nothing. No calls. No apologies. Christmas came. I didn't go. I spent it with Erica instead, making French toast and watching movies on the couch. Around New Year's, I got a card from my mom in the mail. Just a card. No call. No note. Just a stock message about wishing you peace and prosperity. I stared at it for a full minute, then dropped it in the trash. And that's when I knew. I had finally let go. Not in a dramatic, movie-ending kind of way. Just quietly. Like closing a door that had been creaking open for too long. But then, just when I thought the storm had passed, fate delivered one final twist. An invitation. My parents were throwing a formal dinner party in early March. Their 40th anniversary. A full guest list. Big venue. Suits and gowns. And I was invited. The invitation arrived in a gold-trimmed envelope with my full name printed in calligraphy. It was over the top, like something out of a wedding catalog. And in the bottom corner, handwritten in my mother's careful script, was a note. It would mean a lot if you came. Jake will be there. He's doing much better. I almost laughed. But then I paused. Because a part of me, the part that had been silent for so long, knew this wasn't just another party. This was the moment. The one where everything that had built up over the years, every slight, every dismissal, every time they looked right past me, was finally going to reach the surface. I wasn't going for revenge. I was going for truth. But what happened at that dinner? Even I couldn't have planned for how satisfying it would be. And it all started with a single sentence. Just 12 little words that dropped like a bomb. There's a peculiar kind of stillness before you execute something big. Not rage. Not bitterness. Just clarity. That's what I felt when I held the invitation to my parents' 40th anniversary dinner. Heavy cardstock, gold trim, an embossed crest like they were royalty. And that little handwritten note at the bottom? Jake will be there. He's doing much better. That was the spark. I didn't respond right away. I let the RSVP deadline pass, knowing full well they'd assume I'd show. They always did. I wasn't the child they invited. I was the child they expected to orbit. But I wasn't that man anymore. The truth is, I'd spent years holding my breath around my family, shrinking myself so their opinions wouldn't bruise. But not anymore. Now I was calm. Still, I didn't want to burn bridges. I wanted them to walk across one and see, finally, who had built the damn thing. I started laying the groundwork that same night. I opened my laptop and typed up a new internal job posting. Temporary event coordinator, executive liaison. It sounded fancy because I wanted it to. I emailed it to a trusted staffer, Maya, one of my most competent operations leads, and asked her to handle the logistics. Venue research, vendor coordination, guest check-ins. The kind of polished execution my parents had never associated with me. Next, I contacted a luxury PR consultant I'd worked with once during a funding round. Her name was Savannah, and she was one of those people who could turn a silent room into a standing ovation with a few power words and a signature red blazer. I asked her for help, quietly. Nothing too obvious. I wanted polish, presence, and poise. She agreed. Subtle dominance, she called it. I liked that. Then came the wardrobe. Now, I'm not a flashy guy. I usually wear dark polos, quiet shoes, and a watch that does its job and nothing more. But for this, I wanted presence. So I booked an appointment with a private tailor in the city who dressed corporate executives for Forbes covers. He fitted me for a charcoal wool suit with a soft sheen, Italian cut, silk lining, and a pocket square in muted navy. Not loud, but unforgettable if you paid attention. And just when I thought the plan was set, something else happened. Jake emailed me. Subject line, thank you again. It read, Hey Liam, I know things got weird. I just want to say thanks again for keeping me on. I'm getting back on my feet, and I think this new branch gig might actually be good for me. I also heard about the anniversary party. I hope you're coming. It's going to be a big deal for them. Would be good to see you there. Jake. It was polite, almost brotherly, but it still stung. He didn't know I'd seen the video of him sneaking into our systems. He didn't know the only reason he still had a paycheck was because I'd decided silent exile was more powerful than public punishment. He didn't know I was about to walk into a room where for the first time ever, I would be the one who held the narrative in my hands. The venue was a country club outside town. White stone exterior, glass chandeliers, valet parking. Not my parents' usual style, which meant someone else, probably Aunt Marcy, had helped plan it. Savannah got me on the guest list last minute, coordinating with the club under my company's name. Just enough to ensure they knew who I was when I arrived. The evening of the party, I arrived precisely 25 minutes late. Not enough to be rude, just enough to be noticed. I stepped out of a town car, not a limo, not a flashy sports car, just sleek and clean. The valet nodded like he knew who I was. Inside, the room was buzzing. White tablecloths, servers weaving through with hors d'oeuvres, a string quartet in the corner. My family was scattered in small clusters. My dad near the fireplace, drink in hand. My mom by the bar with her friends. Jake in a circle of cousins, laughing at something like he didn't have a single regret. I didn't look for them. I didn't wave. I just walked in slowly, letting people notice on their own. And they did. People turned. A cousin blinked and whispered something to his wife. My aunt's smile froze for half a second. Jake saw me, and something shifted behind his eyes. He didn't wave either. I was led to my table by a club staffer who greeted me with, "Welcome, Mr. Hayes." I didn't correct him. Didn't say, "Oh, I'm just Liam." That's who I used to be. Tonight, I was something else. I made small talk with strangers, colleagues of my father's, old neighbors, distant relatives. They asked what I did. I gave the simplest version. I run a tech company. Logistics optimization. We make systems move more efficiently. They nodded, not quite understanding, but respectful. One man even said, "Wait, your company? Not bad, kid." After dinner, my parents stood at the front of the room, bathed in warm spotlight. My mother wore a champagne-colored dress, hair pinned neatly, makeup meticulous. My father had that familiar smugness in his stance, a man used to being the center of his world. "Thank you all for coming," he said into the mic. 40 years, it's a big one. And we're lucky to be surrounded by so many people we love. There were polite claps. Then he added, "And of course, we're especially proud of our son, Jake. He's had a rough year, but he bounced back strong. You can't keep a good man down." I heard the words, and I smiled. I waited. The moment was coming. Jake chuckled awkwardly, trying to look modest, but there it was again, that glimmer of pride in my father's voice. The echo of "our only successful child" still rattled in the background like a drumline. After a few more thank yous, my mom took the mic and said, "Now that we've said our piece, we'd love to hear a few words from any of you. Jake, maybe say something." Jake stepped forward, cheeks slightly flushed. I wasn't planning anything," he said. "But I just want to say thanks to my amazing parents. You guys supported me even when things went sideways. And I'm happy to say I'm working again. Things are stabilizing, and I'm looking forward to what's next." There was applause. Not thunderous, but polite. He smiled and looked relieved. Then, as the clapping died down, someone said, "Liam, say something." It was Aunt Marcy. All eyes turned. I shook my head. "No, that's okay." But then my mother said, "Go on, Liam. Don't be shy. Don't be shy." Like I was 12 again. I stood up, walked slowly to the front of the room, every step measured. Took the mic from the stand, adjusted it slightly. Looked around. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. I began, keeping my voice calm. But since we're all here, family, friends, old neighbors, I'll say this. I paused. My father raised a glass, already smirking. I remember, not too long ago, sitting at a table kind of like this one. Same faces, same energy. And I heard someone say, "We're proud of our only successful child." The room stiffened. Jake's smile vanished. My mother's eyes darted. "I was sitting right there," I continued, "but it was like I didn't exist. And that's okay, because sometimes invisibility is fuel." I met my father's eyes. I used that fuel to build something. Not for praise, not for recognition, just because I knew I could. I turned to the audience. So if any of you are sitting here tonight, feeling overlooked, dismissed, or invisible, just know this. That silence, that underestimation, it's leverage. I smiled. Then came the final line. "And speaking of leverage, Dad, how's Jake enjoying cleaning the executive bathrooms?" A pin could have dropped. The room froze. My mother's hand went to her mouth. Jake stood up slowly, eyes wide. My father looked like someone had slapped him. I handed the mic back to the MC, nodded once, and walked off stage. I didn't look back. The silence after I dropped the mic was almost louder than the string quartet trying to fill the tension. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Wine glasses were set down with trembling hands. And Jake just stood there, frozen between fury and shame. He wasn't used to being on the other end of the punchline. I didn't stay to gloat. I walked straight past him, my father, and every open mouth in the room, collected my coat, and left. Not a dramatic exit. Just clean. Final. Like closing a deal that's long overdue. That was the moment everything flipped. But the real revenge? That unfolded in the weeks that followed. Slow, deliberate, and without a single raised voice. 3 days after the party, I got a call from my mom. "Liam," she said, trying to keep her voice light. "What was that comment at the dinner supposed to mean?" I didn't pretend not to know what she meant. I said calmly, "It means Jake works for me. In facilities. He has for months." "You didn't know?" Dead silence. "Wait," she said, and I could hear the confusion turning into disbelief. "You're saying you gave your brother a janitor job?" "No," I replied. "I gave him a job. The one he was qualified for." "You humiliated him," she hissed. "You humiliated us." No, Mom. I didn't humiliate anyone. I hired my brother when he had nowhere else to go. Quietly. With dignity. And while you were parading him around as your success story, I kept his actual job title to myself. Until you insisted on making a speech. She didn't respond right away. I could hear her breathing shift, short, angry exhales like a kettle just about to boil. Then she asked, bitterly, why would you do that? That question said everything. Not thank you for helping your brother. Not we're sorry we didn't know. Just, why would you show us up? I almost said, because you made me invisible for 30 years, but I didn't. I just said, you should have asked what I do. Even once. And then I ended the call. The next day, Jake didn't show up for work. I got a message from the branch supervisor. Jake Hayes failed to report to shift. No call, no notice. I wasn't surprised. I gave it a day, then 2, then a week. On the 8th day, he emailed HR and formally resigned. No explanation. But I did get a text. I'm out. Don't contact me. That was it. No apology. No ownership. Just retreat. And I let him go. Because I didn't need his closure. I already had mine. But the fallout didn't end with Jake. My father emailed next. He never called. He's never been one for direct confrontation when a passive-aggressive message will do. Liam, I think you owe the family an apology for how you handled the party. That was neither the time nor place for such a statement, and you embarrassed your brother in front of people who respect him. If you want to have a private conversation, I'm willing. But that behavior was out of line. Dad, I stared at the email for a while. Then I wrote one back. Dad, I don't owe anyone an apology. I told the truth. If Jake had been honest about where he worked and what he did, I wouldn't have had to say a word. But he let you prop him up on a pedestal built from fiction, and I stood there quietly, as always, until you handed me the mic. You've spent my entire life pretending I wasn't there. That ends now. Liam, I never got a reply. A month passed. Then 2. My mother tried again, once, sending a group text to the family, asking if we'd like to do a spring barbecue. No one responded. At least, I didn't. Instead, I focused on the company. On Erica. On myself. We were scaling faster than I'd anticipated. Savannah helped us secure 2 features in respected industry journals. Our headcount grew by 12.25, and my workdays shortened to 6 hours by design, because I could finally breathe without seeking validation from the people who'd never given it. Erica and I took a week in Barcelona. We walked the markets, drank espresso under flower-covered balconies, and didn't talk about work once. She liked me for who I was, not who I'd proven myself to be. When I returned, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. It was from Jake. Liam, you win. I don't even know what else to say. You were right. I took the easy road most of my life, and it caught up with me. I was proud once. Now I'm just tired. I don't hate you. I envy you. And yeah, I lied. I let Mom and Dad think I was something I wasn't. Because that's the only way they look at you like you matter. You've never played that game, and I guess that's what makes you stronger. I'm not asking for anything. Just thought you should know I see it now. Jake. I folded the letter neatly and put it in a drawer. I didn't write back. Some things don't need closure. Just silence. 3 months after the anniversary dinner, my parents tried to hold another gathering. A brunch, this time, to reunite the family. The invite went out to everyone. Very few showed up. Apparently, word had gotten around. Cousins who once echoed their favoritism started seeing things differently. They'd seen the way I carried myself at the party. The confidence. The presence. And when they heard the full story, where Jake really worked, what I'd built quietly over the years, many of them reached out to me directly. My cousin Matt invited me to speak at his business school. My aunt asked if I could help her son with an internship. The invisible child was finally seen. I wasn't doing it to prove a point anymore. But the validation, when it came on my own terms, was sweet. One afternoon in early summer, I stopped by the bookstore I loved as a teenager. The owner, Charlie, had kept the place alive through 2 recessions. We got coffee, talked life, business, family. You know, he said, sipping his cappuccino, you always struck me as the quiet kind who sees everything. I smiled. Turns out, I was just waiting for the right moment to speak. He laughed. And when you did, you made sure the whole room heard. Jake eventually found another job, mid-level management, at a commercial cleaning supplier. Not glamorous, but honest. I didn't reach out. I didn't need to. We'd said all there was to say. My parents? They never apologized. But they stopped making speeches. Stop pretending. The next Christmas, I sent them a card. Just a card. No gift. Inside I wrote, I'm doing well. Hope you are too. Liam. Simple. Civil, cold. That was the end of the war. Not a bang. Not a courtroom drama. Just distance. But in that distance, I finally found peace. And one final thing. When our company hit a major milestone that summer, 1 million active users on our logistics platform, I threw a party. Not a flashy one. Just close friends. Staff. People who mattered. Near the end of the night, someone handed me the mic and said, Liam, say a few words. I paused, smiled, and said, here's to the quiet ones. The ones no one sees coming. We don't ask for attention. We earn it. And when the time is right, we speak. That was it. That was all. And for the first time in my life, they listened. Some people chase validation. Others build empires in silence. I chose the latter.